If you've been scrolling through endless specs sheets, watching YouTubers compare every possible GPU, and still feel the sting of indecision, you're not alone. The gaming PC market feels like a maze of numbers, and the fear of dropping a few $100s on a machine that won't actually let you play the titles you love at the settings you crave is real. That hesitation is why I'm breaking this down the way a regular buyer would, looking at how the machine lives day to day, what compromises are hidden in the fine print, and who will actually get their money's worth. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the Aurora from Skytech is built around an AMD Ryzen 7 7700. On paper, that's a 3.8 GHz base chip that can boost up to 5.3 GHz. In practice, that means you have more than enough headroom for modern shooters, open-world RPGs, and even a bit of streaming on the side. I ran a few typical sessions, 30 minutes of Elden Ring at 1440p with high preset textures, then switched to Fortnite at 1080p Ultra to see how the frame rate held up. The system never dipped below 60 frames per second on Elden Ring, and Fortnite hovered comfortably in the 140,150 frames per second range. For a pre-built, those numbers line up with what you'd expect from a similarly spec'd custom rig. The graphics card is a GeForce RTX 5060 Ti with 16 GB of GDDR5 memory. That card sits in a sweet spot right now, cheaper than the RTX 4070 but still powerful enough for ray-traced effects at 1080p and decent 1440p performance. In real use, you'll notice the difference when you enable DLSS or ray-traced reflections in titles that support them. In Cyberpunk 2077, the Aurora kept a stable 55 frames per second at 1440p with medium ray tracing, which is impressive for a card that's not in the high-end tier. If you're aiming for 4K at max settings, you'll start hitting the ceiling, but the machine isn't marketed as a 4K flagship, it's a solid 1080p TO 1440p performer. Storage-wise, the 1TB Gen 4 NVMe SSD is one of the biggest practical wins. Games load in seconds, and the drive speed means you won't be waiting for texture pop-ins in open-world titles. I tested load times in Starfield, and the difference between the first and second load was negligible, both under 15 seconds. That's a tangible quality of life boost that you can feel every time you jump into a new world. Now let's talk about the parts that aren't shouted from the front page. The power supply is a 650W gold-rated unit. It's sufficient for the current components, but it leaves little room for a future upgrade to a more demanding GPU. If you think you might want to swap the 5060 Ti for a 4080 in a couple of years, you'll probably need to budget for a new PSU. The cooling solution is a high-performance air cooler, which does a respectable job. Temperatures sit in the low 70 SC under heavy load. However, the case design isn't optimized for silent operation. You'll hear the fans spin up noticeably during long sessions. If you plan on gaming in a shared space or at night, that fan noise might be a factor. Wi-Fi is limited to 802.11 AC, Wi-Fi 5. Most modern routers still support this standard, and for a typical household it's more than adequate. The downside appears if you have a Wi-Fi 6 router and expect the latest efficiencies. This PC won't take advantage of that newer protocol. It's a small trade-off, but worth noting if you're building a future-proof setup. Who should consider buying this machine? If you're a gamer who wants a ready-to-play PC out of the box, without the headache of sourcing a motherboard, matching RAM, and worrying about BIOS updates, the Aurora hits the mark. The 32GB DDR5 at 5600 MHz gives you plenty of headroom for multitasking, and the Windows 11 installation means you won't have to deal with bloatware or driver headaches. It's also a good fit for streamers who want a decent CPU for encoding while still maintaining high frame rates in the game itself. The built-in Wi-Fi and the fact that it ships with everything pre-installed make it a hassle-free entry point. Conversely, if you're an enthusiast who enjoys hand-picking each component, tweaking overclock settings, or you already own a high-end GPU, this might feel limiting. The PSU's capacity and the Wi-Fi standard are the two main constraints that would push a power user toward a custom build. Additionally, if you're hunting for the absolute quietest rig, the stock fans may be a deal breaker. There are quieter aftermarket coolers that could keep noise down. The value proposition comes from the balance between performance and price. With a Ryzen 7 and RTX 5060 Ti, you're paying for a machine that can handle the current generation of games at respectable settings without the premium of a top-tier card. The 1TB Gen 4 SSD and 32GB DDR5 are upgrades that you'd otherwise have to add yourself, and they push the total cost down compared to buying each piece separately. The rating of 4.5 out of 5 stars from over 400 reviewers suggests that most owners feel the price.